At Medical Service Company, our dedicated PAP adherence clinical team provides customized support programs tailored to each patient's unique needs. We set clear, achievable goals to help patients reach their full potential and improve their overall health. By integrating the latest sleep adherence techniques, we offer expert care and continuous monitoring, addressing PAP concerns as they arise. Our commitment extends beyond the first 90 days, focusing on long-term success through one-on-one support that promotes patient compliance and lasting results. As advocates, we are here to dedicate to ensuring our patients' success and long-term well-being. For more information about our PAP adherence clinical team, please reach out to your local territory manager or visit www.medicalserviceco.com.
We hope you have enjoyed today's educational forum. With that being said, this brings us to our final speaker for this afternoon's sleep track. I am excited to introduce Rebecca Thomson. Rebecca currently serves as the Clinical Research Manager for Fisher Paykel Healthcare based in Auckland, New Zealand. In this role, she oversees pivotal research initiatives that drive innovation in healthcare technology and improve patient outcomes globally. With over 9 years of experience in clinical research, Rebecca has been at the forefront of studies that advance medical science and help shape the future of healthcare. Her expertise spans a wide range of clinical trials and research methodologies, and she's passionate about translating research findings into practical healthcare solutions. Today, Rebecca will share her lecture, Care by Design, Ensuring Patient Voice at the Center of Innovation. During the presentation, please submit any questions that you may have for Rebecca using the Engage tab above the presentation screen. Questions will be addressed as time allows following the conclusion of the presentation. Don't forget to complete and submit the evaluation at the end of the session to receive credit for attendance. We hope you enjoyed this lecture.
Thank you so much for joining my lecture today. My name is Rebecca Thomson. I am the Clinical Research Manager for the OSA product group here at Fisher Paykel Healthcare, and I am actually based in Auckland, New Zealand, where our headquarters is. So I am very far away from you across the world. You're probably a little bit disappointed that I actually am American and I don't have a New Zealand accent. I get that a lot, but I am here and I'm so excited to be talking to you about care by design and ensuring patient voice at the center of innovation. So this talk will go through our overarching product development philosophy and give you a bit of an insight into how we actually approach product design here at F&P. Specifically in the obstructive sleep apnea product group, there are a number of other product groups that do things slightly differently. So this is very specific to what we do in OSA. So the objectives of this lecture are to really just to talk through what Fisher Paykel Healthcare's patient-centric design philosophy is and what that means for us, and give you a bit of an overview on the mask development product lifecycle and how patient and consumer needs are actually considered as design inputs at the beginning of that cycle, and then how that whole process works with closing the loop at the end with user verification and validation testing in preparation for high volume manufacturing so that you can actually use the products that we design here and use them with your patients. So I wanted to start by giving you a bit of an overview about who we are as a company. Like I said, we are based in Auckland, New Zealand. We've been around for a while, but in various different states. We were established in 1934, and we developed the first respiratory humidifier in 1970. We started as a branch of Fisher & Paykel Appliances. Some of you may be familiar with Fisher & Paykel Appliances. They make dishwashers and fridges and washing machines and all kinds of whiteware for your home. But in the 70s, we actually split off, and now we're actually two completely separate companies. We don't make fridges, we don't make dishwashers, we only make medical products now. The appliances company is actually down the road from us, so we're still quite close, but we are actually completely two separate companies. We are a global leader in respiratory care and humidification. We develop technologies and medical devices which aim to provide solutions for both clinicians and patients. Our products are used by patients in over 120 countries around the world, and we're actually quite a large company for a New Zealand-sized company. We've got 7,000 employees based globally, but here on site in New Zealand, we have about just over 3,000 staff, and that includes all research and development, logistics, supply chain, manufacturing, all the pieces of the puzzle actually happen on site in New Zealand. We do also have a manufacturing facility in Mexico, but that is purely manufacturing. All research and development happens here in Auckland. So what drives our design philosophy? And this is really the core and the crux of where we start when it comes to design here at Fisher Paykel Healthcare. And that philosophy is driven by doing what is best for the patient. We really want to understand their journey. We want to really connect with the challenges they've experienced throughout their diagnostic journey, through their treatment journey, and really taking a position of really spending time to understand their experience and what they've been exposed to, and try and make that journey as seamless and as easy and wonderful as possible. Being diagnosed with potentially a lifelong condition such as obstructive sleep apnea and knowing that there is no cure is incredibly taxing. It's very emotionally driven. And we want to make sure that every person that has a hand in any piece of that design process is putting that hat on for our patients when they can't be here for us in the office and give us that day-to-day reminder. It's really our jobs to make sure that we are doing that in everything that we do. So everything that we do is around doing what is best for the patient. And we really believe that if we do what's best for the patient, then we're doing what's best for every other piece of that puzzle: our clinicians, our physicians, our equipment providers, and our support people that are interacting with every product that we send out the door. So this is a really key focus for us. We really want patients to enjoy the experience with their products, but we want to make that journey as seamless for them as possible. So the first step for us is really understanding our who, and understanding our who is not just the patients, although, like I said, they are at the core of our thinking, but every piece of this puzzle comes with a group of people that has a set of needs and a set of things that are really valuable to them. And trying to balance all of those needs is, one, really challenging, but two, we need to really understand everything that we possibly can about this process and what those needs are and how they actually translate to good outcomes for that particular user group. So we do try and create a deep connection to each of these users. So we meet with patients, we meet with clinicians and physicians. We do meet with our equipment providers and our customers that kind of serve as the intermediary between the patient and us, and our support people. So bed partners, not everybody's married, of course, but husbands or wives or partnerships, people who are involved in that journey also have a stake in the needs of how the products are. So we spend a lot of time building that deep connection to the needs of all of these user groups, not just one in particular. We also have other needs that we need to consider, like anthropometrics. So everybody's face shapes are different, and there are requirements and needs around how a mask should fit, the size of a cushion, the size of the headgear, just from a measurement perspective. And so understanding the needs of a particular product or a mask in this case, knowing the geometries of the face faces that we're designing for is a really key piece of this. And that's not necessarily the same as a need for a patient. A patient may want it to be comfortable, but that may not necessarily be the right approach. So we need to consider also their anthropometrics and how it actually sits on the face, and then work on comfort as a separate input to that needs bucket. We also really strongly consider usability. So we know that patients might have dexterity issues, arthritis, they might have limited visibility or challenges with eyesight. So it's really important that we consider these needs both for our patients and our support people who might be interacting with a mask or a product. And we also want that interaction to be really positive. We don't want them to struggle. We want them to really intuitively know how to use their product. So understanding what that intuition is also a really key piece of this needs bucket in our WHO category. But we also consider business needs as well. We know that there are people that are buying products from us, and then of course sending them on to their patients directly. So there are business needs that we need to consider. One example of this is it might be really great for us to get a really good fit of a mask and have 10 cushion sizes, but I don't know many businesses who'd want to try and figure out how to stock 10 cushion sizes and what that sizing process would look like for a patient. You probably wouldn't be able to have a fit pack or a pack that contains all the seals. If you've got 10, you've got a lot of waste. The sustainability side of that is challenging. So we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can with as little as possible. So we do consider business needs as part of our understanding our WHO. And our design approach is really four-phased. It might be a bit more detailed for some things than others, but at a really high level, everything will go through this hierarchy of phases. So the first thing is we want to, after we understand the needs of each of our user groups, we want to identify the unmet needs, and we'll undertake extensive research across multiple channels, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. Then we'll go into a generation phase where we look at different kinds of prototypes or solutions that might address these needs. And then we enter a testing phase where we make changes to a proposed design, and then we test it, and then we iterate it again, and then we test it, and then we iterate it again, and then we test it again. And we do this cycle in a continuous loop until we're happy with a final design that we can progress to manufacturing and market release so that it reaches you. So this is really at a high level what everything will go through in that design process. So the first phase is identifying the unmet needs and creating a bit of a scope. So every process or project will start with an intensive research cycle. And we go through quite a large amount of data to complete this research cycle. So the first thing we want to do is confirm that our assumptions remain valid. So we are in some ways very lucky that we are a 40-year-old therapy, which has very clear expectations for what that masks should be doing in this case. But we want to make sure that we're keeping ahead of trends and that we're making sure that we're continuing to innovate in a way that allows us to meet those expectations, but also ensures that we're not, just kind of going out into the ether and doing anything, that we have a set of assumptions that we base our kind of core decision-making on. And we want to make sure those assumptions remain valid and have a long runway for them so that we're not anticipating new changes very soon. We'll also then jump into looking through all of the published clinical literature, and we want to make sure that we're staying in front of clinical trends. This is another way for us to clearly identify our outcomes, things that are of interest to us. And we want to also make sure that we're in line with state of the art. So a lot of people think of state of the art as the latest and the greatest and the best of the best, and that's kind of one definition of state of the art. But the other side of state of the art is making sure that we're actually providing what's expected of that product and the care in terms of what is first line at the moment. So it might not be the best, but it's a way of assessing how good we are to meeting the standards of that delivery of a therapy. So we want to make sure that we're always in line with state of the art or pushing the boundaries of what state of the art actually is. We'll conduct focus groups. So we might often do these with patients, really understanding their journey and bringing them back to the center of our why and what we're doing. So we'll conduct focus groups. We'll do those both in New Zealand and overseas, so we can get a wide range of opinions and views. And we'll get them to talk to us about their journey from diagnosis all the way through their equipment provision and that kind of transition into long-term care. We'll also do targeted interviewing if we have specific questions about a topic or a group of topics for a specific group of people. So we might do one-on-one interviewing with physicians to really understand their practices, one-on-one interviews with equipment providers or respiratory therapists to really understand their kind of day-to-day work and make sure that we're including that as part of our research cycle. We do ethnographic research, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But on the surface, it's about really understanding people's behaviors and why they do what they do and really connecting to their kind of intuition when it comes to their kind of behavioral processes. We'll also loop back through our anthropometric database. We might be wanting to undertake a project that's specific to a cohort of people. So making sure our database is up to date and doing a bit of a recruitment drive for a group of people to get more data to be able to enable us to assess our designs down the road. We will also look through our accessible regulatory databases. So for example, through the FDA, there is a database referred to as MAUDE, and this is a common database for complaints reports to come through. It's not just for Fisher and Paykel devices, it's for all FDA regulated medical devices. So we get to see trends that we can't really see just looking at our own internal data. We want to go quite wide and understand what the state of the field is and not just kind of what's siloed within the data coffers of Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. But we do also look at our post-market internal surveillance data as well to make sure that there isn't any red flags and that we're going down the path we want to go down with all of the information that we already know internally. So with all of this research, we can create a scope for a project, or a mask in this case. And part of that scope is standards driven. So there are minimum expectations of performance for a product. We carry those through everything. It's just, we have to do them. We have to make sure that we're complying to the standards to gain regulatory approval in various countries. So this is a really key part of the scope of every project. So we have those minimum expectations of performance that we can build on from there. Then based on the needs of the patient, the needs of the equipment provider, and the needs of the clinician, we'll bring as many of those in as we can. Of course, every project can't tackle every problem. So we've created a hierarchy of needs that really considers all of the top opportunities for us to really make an impact across each of these three different user groups, and make sure that within the scope, there's access to creating improvements or change or things that are going to be meaningful to each of these groups within that scope. So a little bit more about ethnographic research. So this is really, like I said, all about behaviors of patients in particular, but also we bring in other groups into that as well. But this is really about just observing how people interact with their equipment. How do they get into their preferred sleeping positions, and what are their preferred sleeping positions? What is their pre-bedtime routine? So we know that some patients like to chuck their mask on and desensitize to it before they go to sleep. They might want to read in bed, or they might want to watch TV. They might want to pop their glasses on. Really understanding their preferences when it comes to their pre-bedtime routine. Do they like to, how do they wash their face? What is their whole kind of journey to get to their comfortable place in bed? We're also really interested in cleaning preferences. We are very aware that people want to be able to chuck their masks into their washing machines or in their dishwashers to make it really easy. That's not always in line with the user instructions, but we want to understand what their preferences are. And if they can't do what they would prefer to do, what is the process that they actually follow? We also know that support people are often the ones that are, helping their family member with, especially with cleaning, disassembly, and reassembly. So really understanding the support people's journey, how easy is it to clean, how simple is it to clean, are there too many nooks and crannies, are there too many crevices, are there dirt traps, really understanding their preferences, but also their journey within that cleaning process, because it can be quite a hassle. We're also really interested in understanding their use environment. So how do they set their equipment up, and do they put it on their bedside table? Do they want to put it on the floor? Do they want to put it somewhere else? And really understanding how they would like to set their environment up. But also, are they traveling a lot? Do they travel a lot for work? Do they like to go on vacation? Do they like camping? Are they in their RV? And really understanding how each of those plays a role in the kinds of equipment that they're drawn to and that they connect really, really well with and have integrated into their lives. But we can also observe their challenges without them having to tell us. So a lot of the ethnographic research that we've done has really highlighted things like headgear tangling and issues with Velcro, where things are all stuck together. And you just hear patients grumbling and mumbling and, cursing under their breath because they just hate it. But they've put up with it. So they don't necessarily see it as a problem because it's expected for them. So they've kind of accepted what the state is. But you can get a better, deeper understanding about what's actually challenging to them or what kind of grinds their gears through this process of just observing them putting their mask on and taking it off and taking it apart and putting it back together and, watching them go through their pre-bedtime routine. You get a very different sense of how they're interacting with their mask. Anthropometric data is really important to us. So the image on the right, you can see that everybody's nose shape is quite different. Some of them are more flat and wide. Some of them are more long and pointy. Even the nares themselves have a variety of different shapes and sizes. Some might be more round, some might be more oval, some might be narrow, some might be a little bit wider. The septum distance or thickness, the septum length. It's all very, very difficult to try and figure out how you can fit all of these faces with 3 or 4 cushion sizes. So it's really important that we have a large enough data set to compare potential opportunities for cushion design to. And what we'll do is we'll actually do a 3D CAD model of a proposed cushion design. And we can actually put it on the 3D model in the anthropometric database. And what this allows us to do is understand what those contact points on the face are. And we can make really minor adjustments without having to actually 3D print something or tool something up and create an actual prototype and then find out that you're off by, a couple of millimeters or a couple of little pieces of measurement, when you could have just had a digital way of doing that. Now you've got extra waste, you've wasted time. So this is a really important tool for us to be able to quickly prototype cushions and understand how things are going to fit on an actual person's face without actually needing to put it on them and to create something physical. This database also has multiple data points around the face so that we can understand measurements across different areas. We want to keep that field of vision free. So what are the distances between the eyes that we need to consider, the cheekbone and the ears, other areas around the face and the chin if we're considering a full face mask. So there's lots of different data points within the anthropometric database that give us a good insight into who we're designing for and what needs to happen in terms of the geometry of a cushion. We also have measurements of the septum, as you can see on the screen as well, and of the nares. For, in particular, pillows masks, we want to make sure that the geometry of the opening of a pillows mask is appropriate and is going to actually seal effectively and not be uncomfortable. So how we design that and how we make that opportunity work better for a patient is really in a lot of that geometry in the nares. So having that data is incredibly important. And so then we move into phase 2. Once we've got a really good idea about what we want to do and what our targets are, we can start looking at actually generating solutions and prototypes to address those challenges. We can do this a couple of different ways. We can have multiple solutions or multiple prototypes that address one problem, or we can have multiple solutions addressing multiple problems. When you're addressing multiple problems with multiple solutions, you've got another variable that you have to contend with that you don't want one solution to create a new problem that you haven't yet considered. So this is a really difficult way to design. However, we might start off with a stream that just looks at one problem and multiple solutions for that, and then build on that as we go. So, for example, perhaps our focus is to create someone needs to have something on their feet. And so you've got multiple different needs and multiple different groups of people that are that want different things and that have different use cases, but you want to try and target what's going to work for everybody as well as it can, but also address the scope of the problem that you're trying to solve. So for example, if we've got different kinds of shoes here, they all solve the problem of needing something on your feet. But we need to go deeper than that. So, we might have a larger proportion of men than women. So we might decide that, maybe the high heels aren't really the right opportunity for us for this particular project. Let's table that as a potential solution. Then we have a need for somebody where they want to be able to run really fast. And you might be able to do that in rain boots and sneakers, but you probably aren't going to run as fast as you could in flip-flops, or as we call in New Zealand, jandals. So you might chuck out the flip-flops as a potential design solution for now. And then you've got 2 options left. And one of the last requirements that you've set in your scope is that you want the shoe to be very light so that they can run and that it's comfortable and easy to use. And so you might be able to create a rain boot that's light, but comparatively to a sneaker, it's not really going to solve the problem that you're trying to address. So you'll pick the stream of prototype or the design option that best aligns with your scope. And in this case, it might be the sneaker. So once we've done that, we'll need to start refining that prototype to get it to a point where we can actually enter phase 3, which is that testing cycle. And this is really, really cyclical. It's a continuous loop, and it doesn't stop until we are actually very happy with the final design, and that it's very clear. So in this testing phase, this is where the clinical investigations happen. This is where the usability investigations happen. We do in New Zealand have an on-site 3-bed sleep lab with NOx A1, so we can run full PSG with all of our prototypes. That's primarily where all of our feasibility studies happen in the lab. Our engineers like to be really close to their prototypes to understand how they're working. So the best place to do that is in the lab with patients overnight, and we can do full monitoring on them as well and make sure that they're safe, of course. Most of our testing happens either in New Zealand or the US. We do other testing in other countries, but much less frequently. There's a few reasons for this. Some are driven by regulatory requirements, and some are just driven by processes that exist that are really easy compared to other countries. Sometimes It's very difficult to get a clinical trial set up in another country. For example, if we wanted to do a clinical trial in France, we would have to translate all of those documents, and then we wouldn't have the ability to really communicate directly with a patient if they speak French and our engineers speak English. So we want to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the best position to get the best feedback we can. We also find that our US counterparts are much more vocal than our New Zealand ones. So we get much more detailed data from US patients than we do in New Zealand. The New Zealand mentality is very much it's okay, I got to deal with it, so it's fine, I'll put up with it, but it works. It's not really granular enough for us to know what we actually need to do to make it better, whereas our US patients are very, very clear with what they like, what they don't like, what they hated, what they loved. So it gives us a much clearer picture about where we need to go for our next phase of development. And all of this feedback gets chucked into further design refinement. So we might go through this cycle 4, 5, 6 times before we're actually comfortable with the final direction of the design. And this process allows us to continue to ensure that our targets and our scope is being met. So how well are we doing from an objective perspective on meeting the overarching goals of a project? And once we have that final design, we can progress that into the market release phase. And I wanted to be really clear that we talk a lot about the product itself, but this testing cycle also includes not just the mask, but the packaging, the user instructions, the sizing guides. All of that goes through an individual process, that testing process and testing cycle, to make sure that people can read and understand the user instructions in a practical way, that they're not dealing with excess packaging that is pointless and isn't clear and is useless, sizing guides that allow them to pick the right cushion size for them the first time, as opposed to having to trial each individual cushion size and go through that process. So all of this gets tested and iterated multiple times to make sure that what we're putting out there is going to be the most effective for the people that are going to be using it. So I did mention we have an on-site sleep lab. I just wanted to share some of the resources we do have on-site as well. So the image on the right is a photo of one of the bedrooms that we have on-site. We have 3 beds that look just like this. They're really cozy, they're really inviting. We want to make it quite homey for our patients when they come in to be participants in research. We also have on the left what we call a usability or informed consent space. And we created this space when we realized that it was trying to do all of that work in a bedroom isn't really conducive to getting the best information you want out of the person you're interviewing or you're speaking to. So we wanted to create a kind of homey environment that was not confronting, that was not forcing somebody to either sit in a tiny chair in a corner of a room or sit on a bed to try and give feedback. It's a much more relaxed, laid back, comforting environment, and we can do the informed consent process for clinical trials in here to keep them, kind of in a waiting room kind of space, but also do some usability work and kind of get them to sit on their couch as they would at home and unbox a mask or unpackage a mask and kind of go through that process for us. So these are some really awesome on-site resources that we have that we utilize quite a bit to go through this testing cycle. I wanted to give you a bit of an overview on how we kind of run clinical investigations at a high level. So every trial we do is slightly different depending on the scope of the trial. But at a very high level, we want to target people who are actually using the products on a regular basis. They're the ones that are the experts, more so than we could ever be. So we'll recruit a group of PAP therapy users to trial a prototype. We'll fit that mask on them and provide them some education and support on how to use the mask, how to clean it, how to fit it, and make sure that they feel confident and comfortable before they leave the office after that initial fitting. We'll ask them to use the mask as their primary mask for a period of time. Usually this is a couple of weeks, but for products that are in a later stage of development and have been through this cycle before, we might ask them to use it for 6 months or longer. And then we'll get feedback through interviewing and questionnaires. So a lot of this feedback is subjective. We do weave in as much objective data as we can to have a balance, but a lot of what we're trying to understand is quite subjective to the users themselves. In general, our outcomes of interest remain quite similar across all products because these are all really important. But depending on the design of the mask, we might have more interest in some of these outcomes than others. So for example, comfort, leak performance, and what we mean by this is not just the amount of leak, but the direction of the leak as well. So we want to know, if there's 20 liters a minute coming out of a mask, we don't really want that. We want to limit that as much as possible. But if there's 3 or 4 liters coming out and it's going directly into the patient's eye, that's not ideal either. So we want to have that balance of both the amount and the direction of the leak if they're experiencing it. We'll ask them to kind of give us a bit of an overview on their user experience. So how did they find fitting the mask, removing the mask, troubleshooting it, cleaning it, all of those things that they have to do on a regular basis with their usual mask. We'll look at durability. So how do the components withstand the test of time? People do different things with their masks. So really understanding how they're cleaning it and how that's impacting its long-term durability and functioning is, of course, of incredible importance to us. We want to make sure that our products last as long as we say they're supposed to. And for some regulatory requirements, they need to last a certain period of time. So we've got 2 kind of drivers when it comes to durability. Aesthetics is really important. So is a mask intimidating? Is a design intimidating? Do they like how it looks? Do they connect with it? We talk a lot about colors and what that means for people. We want to make sure that we're putting something out there that is inviting and that is catching people's eyes, making them want to use it, be intrigued by it, and not petrified of it and wanting to chuck it off their face and put it in a closet and never look at it again. And of course, safety is always a number 1 priority. We do safety monitoring throughout every clinical investigation, and this feeds back into our overarching risk management process to make sure that we're not increasing or introducing new risks or harms to users in any way. So it's very important that we monitor safety throughout these investigations. Usability investigations are a little bit different. We target different user groups. So for clinical trials, we really want to target users because they need to actually use that prototype for treatment. So it's a little bit of a different requirement. But when it comes to usability, we've got different groups of people that we want to target and understand how they interact with each mask and each product. So each usability investigation will have a different target user group. Sometimes we might target multiple user groups in the same usability investigation, but in general, we'll look, of course, still at PAP therapy users. We'll look at caregivers and we'll look at healthcare professionals, but we also like to look at naive individuals. And we think that there are instances where unfortunately, there are patients who go through this diagnostic pathway or they just don't have enough support and they haven't had enough education from their providers. So we want to make sure if for any reason they get their hands on a product and they don't have any education or they don't have any context or they don't have any support, that they can still use the product with the instructions and the packaging and the intuitiveness of the mask that we intend there to be. So this is really important for us as well. So we will provide them during the testing with a prototype mask, and we'll ask them to perform a variety of tasks. We'll get them to put the mask on, we'll get them to take it off, we'll get them to take it apart, we'll get them to put it back together. We'll get a caregiver to fit a mask on an actor or a patient. We'll get healthcare professionals to talk through and go through the reprocessing steps to make sure that they understand the instructions. And that's really what these tasks are designed to do, is to challenge the clarity of the user instructions in the packaging and also challenge the intuitiveness of the mask design. So can you look at a mask and know where you need to disconnect or reconnect the components. If you look into the user instructions, can you actually find where it says how to take it apart and put it back together? So these are really important pieces to understand, and just letting people interact with it and observing that is the key piece of this usability investigation work. So we'll observe these interactions and then we'll record the outcomes. And we don't normally provide much support. We just kind of let them do what they think is best or they think is right, and just let them kind of go through that process without any support or any prompting. It's really for them to go through on their own. But once they're finished, we'll debrief and do an interview. So we can kind of go back to where a participant might be experiencing challenges or confused, and talk through what they were thinking or what they were feeling, and try and understand what confused them or what they weren't sure about or what intuitively they were thinking makes sense, and really understand how all of those pieces fit together when it comes to using a mask. And the outcomes of interest here are a little bit different than clinical investigations. So, of course, clinical investigations also care about efficacy of a mask. That's kind of a key piece as well. But we're not really looking at efficacy or comfort or the leak performance. We're not really looking at any of that. We're really looking at whether the instructions are simple and easy to use and read. We want to understand how many of the expected tasks were completed successfully, and whether there's any safety implications that come out of using this mask. So, for example, the user instructions might tell you to inspect the mask for blockages in the airway, blockages within the mask, to make sure that it's safe to use before each use. And if a patient isn't doing that, or a patient doesn't know how to do that, or they can't read the instructions that tell them what to do, then there are safety implications that come from that. So it's really important that we make a note of which tasks have either been successfully completed, which ones were not successfully completed, or which tasks have the risk of not being successfully completed. So we call those near misses. And then what the downstream implication is it just going to be a bad experience, or is it actually going to potentially result in harm to a patient? So it's really important that we have this piece as well that's very targeted towards using the instructions and the mask, and not so much the efficacy of it. And once we get out of phase 3 and we're really confident with the design, we get into phase 4, which is getting the final design ready for volume manufacturing. So once we have a final design, we actually have to specify the parameters and tolerances to make sure that we're consistently manufacturing that same mask over and over and over again the exact same way. And this is to ensure performance of the mask and ongoing safety of the mask. So there are requirements for product design. So there are measurements and weights and tolerances for each component in the product. There are requirements for the machines and tools that actually make the product. So an injection molder has tolerances and requirements, what temperature you need to cure silicone at. All of that kind of stuff is set as requirements for this particular design to ensure consistency in manufacturing. We also have requirements for materials. So what materials we use, what dyes we use, for if we want to add color in, for example. All of those things have very specific requirements. And now that we've got a final design, we can actually spend the time creating those specific specifications based on what we know works and the approach that we want to take. Once we have all of these requirements and we have the machines creating these products as if they were being manufactured for sale, we do verification testing to confirm that the product continues to meet its technical requirements. So are the tolerances being met? Are there defects in the curing of silicone? Are there tears in the knit of a headgear? What is happening when you try and make millions of product at scale very quickly, what are the challenges that come up, and are they meeting the requirements that we've set through for this product? Both the individual components and the entire mask system have requirements. So, for example, the cushion might have specific requirements around dimensions and geometry. But when you put the cushion together with the rest of the mask system, it needs to not have a leak higher than X threshold. So they all have to work on their own, but they all need to work together. So there are specifications for both the individual components and the mask as a whole. So we also here at F&P design all of the tools, all of the processes and the procedure, the production testing jigs. We design that entire manufacturing process and do that in-house as well. We partner with a lot of organizations around the world to provide us with these tools, but we're the ones that actually do the designing of them. So we've got some really incredible people in both the product development side, but also the process development side. And product design is challenging, but the process design side of this is also equally challenging, and at times even more challenging because you're trying to make millions of products. So the process team doesn't get enough credit for the time and the effort that they put into making sure that we can supply you all with the products that you need in a timely manner, but also not sacrifice quality and expectation and performance and safety of every product that you handle. So I'll give a bit of a shout out to the process team for doing all of the work that they do to get these products into manufacturing. And I wanted to kind of touch on Solo as an example of this. So I'm hoping by now all of you have heard of the F&P Solo. Solo is the world's first auto-fit mask, and the headgear is revolutionary. So what you don't see is all of the components in the headgear that actually allow it to expand and retract as it does. And it's designed that way so you can't see it. But the number of components all have tolerances. They all have specifications. They all have to meet certain requirements, some up to microns. They're very tight tolerances to make sure that we can create the same experience over and over and over again. But that headgear also needs to fit on the frame, tube, and swivel assembly in the right way. There are force requirements for how hard or how difficult it is to take those two components apart and put them back together. The frame clips for the interchangeable cushions for the pillows and the nasal cushion have requirements so that they can meet the same specifications. But all of that needs to work together so you have a mask system that works for your patient and allows for a really good night's sleep, for no leak, efficacious therapy, and an overall good experience. So this is one example of how we take a lot of design time to get the design right, but we actually have a lot of things that you can't see just by looking at it that take the time and the effort to create those tolerances, those specifications to give you the same experience every single time you use that same product. In the phase 4, once we now have the manufacturing side of things squared away and we're happy that the products that are coming off the manufacturing tools are meeting the specifications and meeting their requirements, we can now close that loop with the patients one final time, and we go through a clinical validation process. So this happens after verification. And essentially what we do is we take that clinical investigation process that I showed you earlier, and we do it again as that final stage gate to make sure that now that we've got the final product that will go out into the market, we don't see any major differences from the previous clinical trials, that we haven't introduced new risks, that there aren't any unaccounted for issues, and that we're going through all of our checks, dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and making sure that this product is now ready to be released into the market. But The job isn't done once you have the mask in your hand. You all get so excited when we release new products, and we love that. But for us, that job isn't done. We need to continuously monitor the safety profile and the performance of that product, and make sure that it's continuing to meet its objectives and meet its requirements. So the job doesn't finish. We actually have a whole team of people here on site that solely look after the products that have gone into the field, to deal with any weirdness that might come up, any complaints that come through that indicate that something isn't performing as intended. They do a whole bunch of investigation works with the manufacturing teams. There's communication with logistics in case, you receive a box of masks that gets crushed. Why did that happen? How do we fix that? How do we make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future? So there's a whole team of people that look after kind of our post-market engineering processes. But we also take all of that feedback and plant it into something new. And we start this whole process again from the beginning with the seedling of an idea, and make sure that once that product that we've spent years creating is now out in the market and people are loving it, we hope. When people are really enjoying it, we know that there are still going to be people that see areas of improvement, and that's really important for us to capture and feed back into this continuous loop and start from ground zero again. So it's the whole design process is a continuous loop, and there are multiple continuous loops through it. But at the end of the day, it's the feedback that we get from our patients, from our equipment providers, from our clinicians, that continues to drive this wheel and this cog moving forward. We call this philosophy overarchingly at Fisher Paykel Healthcare care by design. And what I mean by that is we're not just enabling the provision of care for patients with well-designed products. We're actually building care into every thought, every design choice, every decision, every meeting, every clinical investigation or usability investigation, every document that we put together for each product has thought and care built into it. We really care about what we do. We care about the outcomes. We want to be able to provide good care for our patients, but it's the ongoing care through every piece of this puzzle that is really, really the foundation and the core of what we do every single day in the office. And this, for me, is what drives and motivates me and my team to be that patient voice when they can't be in the office, when we're in a meeting making decisions about which design we want to go with, making sure that their voice and their needs and what they want is heard and is taken into consideration at every step of the way. And so care by design is our philosophy that we have adopted, but we very much live by every single day we come to work. And that's everything from me. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my talk today. I hope you learned a little bit more about Fisher Paykel Healthcare and the work that we do, and how much we do care about not just our patients, but our equipment providers, our clinicians, our partners, and we are always keen to hear your feedback, positive and negative. That, like I said, this is a huge piece of what continues to drive us and to push the limits. So we do travel up to the US quite a bit. If you're keen to have somebody from New Zealand come and visit you and give some feedback, please reach out to your rep and let them know, so that when we are in the area, we can stop in and say hi and have a bit of a chat. So please always, our doors are always open. Please always reach out to us, reach out to your reps. And thank you so much. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Brent Mayberger, Director of Partnerships at Medical Service Company. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And I understand you're coming to us live from New Zealand, and it's Friday morning already for you, so TGIF.
It sure is. We're very close to the weekend. We can taste it. And it's actually sunny today, which is amazing.
Oh, that's incredible. Not so much here in Cleveland. So Rebecca, we'll jump into our Q&A portion of the presentation now. What percentage of your research and development is focused on pediatric patients? We
That's
know that,
a really
um, I'm
interesting
sorry,
question. No,
yes.
go ahead.
So, fit, aesthetics, and comfort are important for kids too. PAP therapy for kids involves an added variable of parent participation in putting it on, taking it off, cleaning it, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely a growing area globally, not just in the US. And it's something that we're consistently being asked, and how we look to potentially manage our pediatric populations in the future. This is definitely an ongoing discussion here in the office as well. There are quite a number of different ways we could potentially look at addressing this challenge, whether it's making design changes to existing products or designing something specific for a pediatric population. Those two both are quite an investment, and we really like to understand what problem we're solving for each population. And currently, because our products aren't on label and our masks aren't on label for pediatric use, it's hard for us to know exactly what we need to do in this space. So before we do anything, we would do quite a bit of research to understand the needs of these patients, more specifically the geometries of their faces, especially around the jaw and how that changes over time with their development. Each different kind of age category is going to have different needs and different things that we have to design for. And today we just don't have enough information to make really good design decisions. But it's something that is on our radar, and is something that is really important for us to continue to explore. There's not a quick, easy answer for this question, but I think it is important that you all know that it is something that is on our radar, and we do continuously talk about. And there's a lot of work that needs to go into really understanding this population.
Thank you, Rebecca. One of our attendees states the Evora full face mask is by far the best mask I've used for titrations. I have had patients on very high pressures with no leak several times with this mask. Do you have any full face mask or other hybrids similar in the works?
That's a great question. Well, I can't give anything away. That would be ideal. But I will say that what we've learned through the design process of the Evora Full has been passed through other products that are currently in development, and we take those learnings really seriously. And the Evora Full Face is a great example of the time that it took for us to really understand what an under the nose full face mask needed to do to achieve at high, especially at those higher pressures, for patients who really value this type of design. And we've definitely translated that knowledge into future products. So I'm very confident in saying that you should experience a similar experience to the Evora Full with future full face mask designs that are in development that will be released in the future.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's great to hear how much research and thought goes behind each, mask production. What is the time frame you would expect for a mask to be developed from start to finish?
This is a really interesting question, and there's probably a little bit of variation depending on the style of mask. There's a lot more complexity to a full face mask when it comes to non-rebreathing valves and other components that you don't necessarily have within the nasal or the pillows design space. But Solo was 10 years in the making. It wasn't something that we thought of overnight. We were able to really develop and put into production in a very short period of time. It took a lot of time, technology testing, clinical trials, clinical investigations, usability investigations. We did investigations specifically on the packaging for Solo, to understand how people experienced it, because it's quite novel for us. It's a mask that doesn't come in a bag. It has a box with an insert and instructions. So we spend a lot of time just understanding the packaging side of the product. Ideally, we wouldn't spend 10 years designing and developing a mask. So we're constantly looking at how do we shorten that design cycle. But it isn't something that happens in 2 to 3 years. It is a long process, but we do look to all of the different options we have to shorten that process and shorten those design cycles so that we can get products out quicker, and make an impact longer term much sooner.
Does Fisher and Paykel ever conduct any studies on patients using PAP while sleeping on like a recliner or a couch or anything other than a bed? And if so, what limitations does that create, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Usually, we don't do any specific studies for people kind of sitting more upright. Primarily, our studies are designed to kind of give people a mask and kind of let them do and sleep the way they would normally in their home. We don't necessarily ask them if they sleep in a recliner or they sleep lying flat in their bed or on their side. We do ask sleeping position, but we don't necessarily specifically ask a question around the location of their sleeping. But I think that's a really important thing that we could start looking at more specifically, and whether there are implications. There have been some instances where our study participants have reported to us that they slept on the couch or they slept in a recliner, but these are not necessarily consistent. It's kind of a one-off across a short period of time, or a here and there, as opposed to a consistent thing. But I think there is definitely validity in really understanding different sleeping positions and where people are, especially when it comes to angles of sleeping. I think that's a really good point.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. From Medical Service Company, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. We wish you and your family a safe, happy, and healthy holiday season. As a final reminder, the presentations from today's session will be uploaded to the FeedLoop virtual event platform for educational viewing. If you missed the survey pop-up, you can access the survey later today by watching the video for about 2 minutes, then it will appear. Thank you for your participation in this year's event, and stay tuned for the closing remarks from Medical Service Company CEO, Josh Marks. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your day with us. Today, we had the opportunity to learn from the best in the nation in sleep and respiratory care. We hope you learned at least one something new today. For those of you looking to earn your CEUs from today's event, your certificate of completion will be sent to your registered email address tomorrow, Friday, November 22nd. Your certificate will detail all CEUs earned through completion of the evaluations for the lectures you attended. Your feedback matters to us. Today's event is very important to our team, and we want it to bring as much value as possible to you. Keep an eye out for our email survey in the coming days. We appreciate you taking a moment to share your thoughts to help us make this event the best it can be. In closing, a heartfelt thank you to our speakers, our sponsors, and our fellow DME partners. And a special note of appreciation to our MSC team members contributing to this event, especially our planning committee, led by Julie Banyas and Katie Summer. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you, and see you next year.